Welcome to the GC BizCast, a collaboration of J. Whitney Bunting College of Business and Technology and the Department of Communication at Georgia College and State University. Here we discuss important topics with today's business leaders and educators. We produce weekly podcasts from our beautiful campus in Milledgeville, Georgia. We're excited that you've joined us. Our conversations should inform you and entertain you. The views expressed are the views of the individuals on the program and do not represent the views of Georgia College and State University. So, let's get started.
Hey Greg, I am Charlotte Joyner. I am a junior marketing major.
And I'm Maya Hassler, and I'm a sophomore marketing major.
So we kind of wanted to give you the floor and let you introduce yourself. So if you'll go ahead and do that, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, gladly. My name is Greg Lane. I am somewhat recently retired from the CIA. I worked in the director of operations for about 30 years. I left the agency in October of 2019. Just in time to get front row seats for the pandemic. Since then, I've done sort of a variety of jobs on the outside. I'm a member of an advisory board for a small tech company in Maryland called Rampart Communications. I also do some training with the U.S. Army as sort of a subject matter expert, coach, mentor for units that are preparing for assignments overseas. But as I said, 30 years in the agency. I've spent a good chunk of that abroad in Europe and South Asia and different places. Also had quite a bit of time in our headquarters working on counterterrorism issues, a big chunk of time on counterproliferation, specifically focused on a country of proliferation concern in the Middle East, starting with I. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years. But I originally from California. That's where I met Professor Risvold. We were in high school together in Hemet, California. And then I got into the agency more by luck than planning. When I left graduate school, I was at the London School of Economics. When I left graduate school, I had some vague ideas of things I wanted to do. Working overseas, I thought maybe journalism, State Department, and the sorting hat sort of found me in a way, and I was called out for some interviews back here in Washington D.C. and ended up through a very long process being hired and had a long, wonderful, challenging career. So
very cool.
That's where I am now. Yeah.
The first question I kind of wanted to ask you was, can you describe your current role as an advisor for the tech startup that you mentioned? And then how did your previous career prepare you for this?
Yeah, so when people leave the agency, I think a lot of people have, they're not sure whether and how their skills and experiences will translate into the private sector. I've found that we are actually really well prepared to do a lot of the things in private industry. We are oftentimes, at senior levels expected to run large organizations, manage and lead large groups of diverse people, both in terms of background and substantive expertise. Large budgets, briefing Congress, briefing others in the agency, representing the agency with foreign governments. So all those things tend to translate well into parts of business. And the agency is a place that has been described as a small city or small university. So we have people there who have PhDs in physics, who are have PhDs in history, are very talented in languages, and they are experts in their fields and can do those types of jobs in private sector as well. So anyway, to your question directly, so my background in the agency, sort of networking among people, solving problems, looking for opportunities, was, I think, a good fit as a member of this advisory board. There are others whose background, others in the advisory board whose backgrounds are more specific to sort of the technical field. I am not a technologist and don't represent myself that way. But in terms of addressing organizational issues, leadership issues, looking for opportunities to plug the company in with opportunities within the U.S. government. I think that's that's sort of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And can you speak to kind of follow up with that? You mentioned like leadership issues, and I kind of wanted to frame my question speaking to more ethics in business. And so I don't know if you can speak to this or maybe be vague, but can you kind of talk about maybe vaguely any ethical dilemmas or how ethical dilemmas, having worked in the CIA, are different than your role right now?
Yeah. So I think people, when they look at the agency from the outside, imagine that we have a lot of ethical dilemmas about the things that we do as part of our job. So to be direct about this, the role of the Central Intelligence Agency is to, among other things, steal secrets and espionage. And so if you have an ethical dilemma about that, then you probably wouldn't be working there. But
Yeah.
it's done within the laws and regulations of our own government. And so the things that agency officers are doing on behalf of the government are entirely legal. We have a very rigorous process for reviewing the things that we do, whether it's a technical operation, what kind of information we collect, from whom, how it's used, how it's protected, how it's disseminated. And so we're very thoughtful and methodical in our approach to those things. And the same is true for human operations, which is the process of spotting, assessing, developing, recruiting, handling sources of information that would benefit our policymakers. And we are thoughtful in our approach there. We don't threaten or coerce people into cooperating with us. It's more akin to marketing and sales, but in a different way. We're looking for people who would have a reason to work with us. It might be, sorry.
No worries.
It might be ideological. We might identify some potential vulnerabilities in the person that we might be able to help them out with. There are other things like that we look for. So long way of saying there aren't as many ethical dilemmas as you might imagine. That is not to say that if you read the news over a long period of time, you'll see the agency's name mentioned in some manner of there's some real or imagined scandal. A lot of times those are, in my experience, less than what is presented to the public.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then, you've lived in a lot of different places and even just traveled different places and being in a lot of international areas. How are you able to adjust to the culture quickly?
So I think the attitude and willingness to learn and to adapt is important. If you are going to a foreign country, whether as a representative of business or the U.S. government, and you don't have an interest or a curiosity about learning about the language and culture, you won't be successful whatever you're doing. And the people in the agency and the U.S. government who serve overseas are selected in some ways, or they self-select as being interested in that type of work. So they are people who've studied languages and traveled overseas and are looking for those types of opportunities. The people who I've seen who are not successful, as I said, are those who just don't have a particular interest in learning about the culture and want to basically bring as much Americana with them to wherever their foreign place, and they surround themselves in an American English, sort of English speaking American bubble. They're given the numbers of Americans overseas, you can do that, but as I said, you're going to limit your ability to be successful.
Right. So you don't want to go into the mindset, sorry.
Yeah.
You don't want to go like travel in the mindset of I'm just doing a job, right? You want to kind of embrace.
Yeah, no. And so critically, if it's a country with a non-English speaking country, most of the countries in the world, learning the language is so important. And it doesn't, some languages are just really hard, and you may not, develop a real, professional fluency after 2 or 3 years. But in my experience, there are very few people who are gifted at languages. Learning languages just requires brute force. It requires time and effort. And if you put in the time and effort, you're going to telegraph to the people in that country that you're interested in who they are and what they are doing, and that is super important. And then to learn about the culture in a serious way. Going to Germany and referencing Hogan's Heroes, or the 12 years of German history is the Nazi period, is not particularly effective or credible. Germany has a really rich history with music and literature and science, and they're as proud of that history as the English are of Isaac Newton and others. So it's important to be able to know that and talk about that. I've spent time in other parts of the Middle East where people were always giving me books on things that I didn't know about their history, and it wasn't done in an insulting way. It was just they were really proud of a cartographer or somebody who had sailed the world that just never makes it into Western history books. So
cool.
Yeah, and then to kind of follow up with how much you've traveled and really falling in love with different countries and how you need that to really be successful. I guess the way that I would phrase this question would be, which countries maybe that you've been to or have not yet visited would be, the friendliest or most accepting of women specifically in business? Because I know there may be some out there that aren't as accepting, and I was kind of
it's in my 30 years it's changed dramatically, both within the government context, sort of people working for the U.S. government, but also those representing other governments, and then women in positions in industry. So I think we are. I'm just sort of self-censoring here to make sure I'm not saying something that's totally stupid, but I think the United States is probably ahead of most countries. I think Scandinavia as a region might be, sort of another area that has this, where there are women at high levels throughout the society, in government and science and industry and so on. I think that trend is going in the right direction across the globe, though. In my experience, I've met increasingly women representing their governments at senior positions overseas, women representing the companies of from those countries, whether Italian companies or Swedish companies or Turkish companies. But I think it's probably still harder for women to succeed in different places than it is for men. But I don't think the doors are locked. They might be closed. It's just a matter of doing what needed to open them.
Yeah. And then I kind of also wanted to speak to, I'm not sure if you can answer this. I know this question may kind of come out of left field. So you've had 30 years of experience in the CIA and, intelligence and all of that. And you had kind of said how much has changed in the 30 years, for women. But I kind of wanted to ask, like, how did your role change? And you can be as vague as possible, but how did your role change from when you began at the CIA and then, when you finally left? Can you speak to any of that kind of experience of beginning to end?
Um, yeah, you're talking about sort of insider baseball stuff with the agency in my role. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to start giving you just a primer on the agency, just to sort of set the stage. So there are, fingers up, 5 directorates in the agency. There's a director of operations, science and technology, support, analysis, and the digital innovation. One of those is new, but there were 4 in the past. So the director of operations is the component in the agency, the directorate, that is responsible for the collection of human and technical intelligence from human and technical sources, and the dissemination of that outward. The roles in the director of operation there are different career categories. I was what was called an operations officer or a case officer. So in that capacity, we are expected to go out and meet people who have access to the secrets that we would want to know, and the either the willingness or I'll say the willingness to provide that information to us. And it was our job to figure out how to find that person and get that intelligence. It's in a very basic way, right? It could also mean stealing stuff technically, through a traditional old telephone tap, where on a hard line we would actually go in and physically put something that would route the line to and send a signal to something that we controlled, and we'd be able to capture the information and disseminate it. So there, that would also include getting things through computer operations and so on. As you go through your career in the agency, you go from being sort of a solo actor as a part of a team, to being kind of a leader of a team, to leader of groups of teams, to a leader of whole geographic components. And so my career sort of went that sort of a traditional route that way, where I started out as a case officer on the ground in a overseas sort of Middle Eastern assignment, to leading one of our larger stations and leading one of our larger geographic components at our headquarters. In between that, I had done some jobs where I was responsible for our collection and the counterproliferation area against, as I said, a country of interest in the Middle East. That included doing, sort of looking at, covert action opportunities. Those are the things that the agency does to, at the request of the president and as briefed to Congress, to carry out operations that are meant to hide a U.S. hand, but meant to could be to sabotage machinery or something like that. But those are the types of things that we do, and my career sort of went through that whole arc.
So then something you mentioned was that you were pretty high up in the CIA, which I'm sure comes with a lot of pressure. And right now you train people in the Army. So do you kind of train them how to deal with pressure, or how would you say would be a good way to deal with that pressure? How did you deal with that pressure?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that it's important that when you're doing something that is risky, whether that's physical or showing some kind of moral courage, that being prepared is always a way of of reducing the anxiety you might feel before doing something. And so I'd like to think that I thought about and prepared for things that I was doing, so I wasn't worried about something happening. But I never worried so much about the outcome. I always felt that if I just did what was needed to be done at that particular moment, that the big things would sort themselves out in a way. So I didn't get. I'm not saying that I'm not, I'm human like everybody else. There are times I get nervous and such, but I don't know that I necessarily prepared for that, other than just being mindful of what was expected. Showing up as, I don't know if it was Ronald Reagan or somebody who said 90% of life is showing up and knowing your lines, and there's some truth in that. I remember one time, I won't say where, but I was with an agent of ours, and we were. I was driving, and I was debriefing him as we were driving, just asking him questions, and sort of taking some mental notes on the things he was saying to write a report later on. And we were going down this road, and I saw in the distance some police were setting up a roadblock, like a checkpoint, and I didn't want to stop there because I didn't want him to. We would have to show our IDs, and the truth is, these were just probably sort of roadside cops looking for people smuggling drugs or guns or something, and they probably weren't interested. They weren't thinking about identifying a U.S. government official with a foreign government official. They may have just dismissed. They would maybe not even thought about it. But in my mind, as sort of this, had this guilty knowledge that we were in this clandestine relationship, and so I remember rolling up to this thing, and I thought, there's all the outcomes here are bad. If I get stopped and we have to give IDs, it's bad. If I speed through the thing, and I get caught later, that's bad. And so I did sort of the middle thing. I just slowed down and rolled through it really slowly and didn't stop. So I think I think they both looked at me like I was just like stupid. Like this is a checkpoint, need to stop. And I just sort of gave them a look and rolled through that. And my heart was beating, out of my chest, but it was sort of dumb, but it worked. And so any agency officer is going to have, tons of those experiences where they've just been in, sort of odd, difficult situations. And I think it ends up being, maybe we have a good common sense gene, and that's, part of the recruitment process. But I think most people would tell you that, yeah, they get nervous, but they're, it's just a matter of they're sort of fighting through it.
Yeah. And to kind of follow up with that, you talked about, so you answered Maya's question about pressure and how to deal with pressure, and you talked about thinking through hypotheticals. What are kind of other traits that businessmen and women can emulate from your role and what you've been trained to do and kind of your experiences? What can we take away from that?
Yeah, I think knowing your craft is important. So wherever you work, respecting what you do and understanding what it is that makes people successful in that field is important. And just on kind of a fundamental way, I think it's important we all work in teams in some manner. I think it's vitally important that we treat people well, that you look for opportunities to highlight the work that other people are doing, because whatever you're doing, you're benefiting from somebody else's work in some form or fashion. To recognize that and in a meaningful, not a superficial way, to let them know that you appreciate it and help boost them is important, whether it's in government or business. I think developing a healthy balance in your life is also important. That is not to say like that you need to make sacrifices to be successful. There's just no way around that. Businesses will want to hire people who are going to work hard for them, making money for the company and the shareholders and delivering a good product to consumers, the customers. And it's hard to do that if you're not committed to that mission or that effort. But you're not fully, you're robbing them of some of that effort if you don't take care of yourself and your other commitments, it's family and so on. That balance is different for every person. It's not a algorithm that you can apply to, Charlotte and Maya and Greg have, each of us would have a sort of different way of sorting that out, and it will change through your career. My wife used to say to people that you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all at the same time. And so I think it's especially relevant for women who I think feel perhaps more. I think it's changing, but probably I would say it's still a little bit more pressure as far as having a career, having family, and being expected to take care of kids, and then how to balance that out, and hopefully that we'll get to a point where it's less stressful for women to do that. Working from home has been, I think, in some ways helpful, but it may also increase the actual number of hours people are dedicating to the job. But yeah, so that work-life balance is vital. So I would leave it there.
I like that a lot. Sorry, Maya, did you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna say thank you so much.
We've
really enjoyed getting to hear about your career and what you're doing now and your perspectives, and it's been great. Thank you.
Is there anything else?
May I ask, Professor Risvold had mentioned to me something about data analytics and such. Is that part of your program as well?
Georgia College?
Yeah. So in the business area, are you looking at data analytics as part of the curriculum there?
I can't speak to that kind of off the record. We can edit this portion out. I can definitely get Ward back in here, but I actually can't speak to that. I don't know if I haven't heard anything. I wouldn't be surprised. Georgia College is they're making a new economics program and an entirely new finance major. So I would not be surprised if they were adding a program in data analytics. I know our MIS program here is kind of taking off, which is great to see. And then we also did open an innovation center, and that was also a really great addition for the school.
I was asking partly. I wanted to ask you whether, as part of that, if you knew of it, whether as part of that there was some discussion being had about the potential downsides and misuse of data. And the potential threats that the accumulation of data on individuals in a democratic society has for our democracy. And there are a couple good books that I read in the last few years that talk about that. And I just was sort of curious whether that's being integrated into the sort of business courses for people who are going into the tech fields, whether they are being socialized to some of these issues. The business model for some of these big tech companies is basically to take private information and to turn turn people into the sources of information that they use later to channel behaviors, and that has certainly it's a challenge for democracy. So I was just, as I said, wanted to ask whether that's being discussed in universities now and colleges as people go into business.
Yeah, I would actually say that it is. Maya and I actually both are in a class called Business Ethics with Dr. L, and she has given many lectures and had many guest speakers that a lot of them do speak to the dangers of phishing and, you are your data and, being tracked. And we talked a lot about Facebook and a lot about selling data and those kind of like cybersecurity threats. And yeah, I would say that I know Maya and I are both in that class. We're both marketing majors, so I'm not sure if they're making more of that. But yeah, that's kind
So
of.
if you're interested at all, there's a really good book. It's kind of long, but it's called Surveillance Capitalism by a woman named Shoshana Zuboff.
Okay.
Zuboff. And she's written a number of books. In fact, but that's probably the best one. And then another woman, Rana Foruhar, has written books about the unhealthy business model in big tech. So
Very cool. I always love a good book recommendation. I actually just did a whole Amazon order of a bunch of new ones.
Good for you.
Yeah, but I think our time is kind of coming to a close.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. I hope you got what you wanted from the conversation. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add specifically, or?
No, I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk to you both, and I told Ward that I'd be happy to help you guys out whenever I could. If there's an opportunity to suggest other people to talk to or interview, I'll pass some names to him, and if you want to,
please.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Greg. The pleasure has been ours. Thank you for working with us and shedding so much wisdom and light. You have had a very, very cool, well-rounded career, and it's really cool for both Maya and I to hear about it. So thank you.
Okay. You guys take care.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you.
You too.